Welcome, everyone. I'm Penny Lewis, the Executive Director of the Ecological Landscape Alliance, and I'll be the moderator for today's webinar, Expanding Biodiversity, Attracting Birds to Your Yard. This is part of the Focus on Sustainability webinar series developed by a group of organizations known for their quality ecological education. By collaborating on these webinars, we expand the reach of our programs to a broader audience. In case you're not familiar with our organizations, they're largely nonprofit and volunteer groups in the United States. Our Focus on Sustainability webinar partners are the Chesapeake Conservation Landscaping Council, Deep Roots Kansas City, Rescape California, the American Public Gardens Association, and the Ecological Landscape Alliance. And now I'd like to introduce our presenter, Becky Laboy. Becky is the full-time education outreach specialist with Ocean County Soil Conservation District. She's also an adjunct professor at Keene University. She instructs at the Barnegat Bay Volunteer Master Naturalist course through Ocean County College, and she leads birding tours with Ocean County Parks and Recreation. She serves as co-leader of the Jersey Shore chapter of the Native Plant Society of New Jersey. Becky also co-authored The Kid's Guide to Exploring Nature, published by the Brooklyn Botanic Garden. Welcome, Becky.
Thank you, Penny. Thank you so much for inviting me to present my program today. I'm very excited to be here. As the Education Outreach Specialist for the Ocean County Soil Conservation District in Ocean County, New Jersey, I offer a variety of educational programs that bring awareness to the importance of natural resources, including soil and water, and plants and wildlife. And these programs promote environmental stewardship throughout our local Barnegat Bay watershed on the Jersey Shore. And your role as a backyard gardener is a really important way for you to be an environmental steward of your local watershed as well. If you tuned into this program, I can take a confident guess that you enjoy birds. Perhaps you have chickadees that raise their family in your yard each summer, visiting your feeders and flitting about, calling chickadee-dee-dee. Pictured here is a Carolina chickadee. It looks almost identical to the black-capped chickadee. These maps created by Cornell University Lab of Ornithology show the ranges for Carolina and black-capped chickadees. If you live in South Jersey, as I do, or the southeastern portion of the United States, you likely have Carolina chickadees in your yard. Carolina chickadees are considered endemic to the continental US, meaning they are not found in any other country or area of the world. They are only one of 12 species of United States endemics. And if you live in northern New Jersey or the northern portion of the United States or Canada, it's the black-capped chickadee that visits your feeders. And the black-capped chickadee, I looked it up, is the state bird of Massachusetts and Maine. And both chickadees are non-migratory residents, but because they look almost identical, location is the best guide to determining between these two different species. Or maybe you have song sparrows in your yard who remind you each morning to please, please, please put on your tea, kettle, kettle, kettle. Humans create mnemonics, which are phrases that string together the syllables and notes of a bird's song, making it easier to remember its rhythm, pitch, and tempo. Song sparrows are considered a resident in some areas or a short to medium distant migrant in other areas. Birds from distant Alaska and northern Canada migrate the farthest, flying to the southern United States and northern Mexico to winter. Song sparrows from the northern United States may migrate, but typically don't go as far south as the birds that started from farther north, a pattern called leapfrog migration. Or perhaps your yard is visited by the state bird of my home state, New Jersey, the American goldfinch, who brightens each day with their cheery yellow colors. American goldfinches are short-distance migrants. They travel south in winter to places where the minimum January temperature is no colder than 0 degrees Fahrenheit for any considerable amount of time. Or perhaps you have woodpeckers who visit, such as this red-bellied woodpecker on the left or this hairy woodpecker on the right. They are both non-migratory residents. Birds from some northern populations wander away from their home range during the winter. Birds that breed inland or at high elevations sometimes move to the coast or to lower elevations during some winters. Woodpeckers, chickadees, song sparrows, and goldfinches are only a few of the vast array of bird species with whom we share our yards and our everyday lives. In my program, I'm going to introduce you to some of my favorite species and share ways that you can attract them to your yard. Some key ideas I will address are the ecological connections between birds and plants, how to mimic nature, or how to use the natural semblance of plants to support a diversity of bird species. I'll highlight specific plant species with a focus on trees and shrubs that would make a great addition to a bird-friendly yard. And I'll showcase some important human-made but nature-inspired features that you can add to your yard to attract and support birds. But first, I want to provide you with some background information about our fine feathered friends. So birds are truly special creatures. They are the only living creatures on the planet who have feathers. Feathers help birds stay dry and warm, and colorful feathers help this male wood duck find a mate. But the beautiful brown feathers of the female offer camouflage while she sits on her nest and rears her ducklings in woodland streams. Wood ducks live year-round in the east and along the west coast, and some populations travel to the interior west to spend the winter. They thrive best in freshwater wetlands with plenty of vegetative cover consisting of trees, both standing and fallen, shrubs, and emergent herbaceous plants. True to their name, wood ducks nest in tree cavities high in the canopy. Wooded wetlands are necessary for their survival. Trees, in particular, are an important component to a bird-friendly backyard habitat. Beneath the canopy of the trees on the forest floor, the blend of brown, tan, and white feathers of this ground-nesting Chuck-Will's widow offer the perfect camouflage against a backdrop of oak and holly leaves. A member of the family called nightjars, this beautiful nocturnal bird rests during the day and hunts for insects at dusk. She also relies on fallen leaves to camouflage her precious egg, a good reason to leave the leaves. Of course, feathers also aid in flight. Feathers grow in specific groups and patterns on a bird's body. Primary and secondary wing feathers allow birds to take to the skies. These wing feathers are anchored to the bone by a strong ligament, so they can withstand the demands and pressures of flight, and this allows the feathers to be precisely positioned for aerial maneuvering. And one of the most interesting facts about birds, in my opinion, is that they are descendants of dinosaurs. Over 160 million years ago, some dinosaurs began to grow feathers. The precursors of feathers were bristle-like and hollow, which gradually evolved into complex structures. They did not evolve from scales. The evolution of feathers gave rise to true birds. Modern scientists who study birds often refer to them as avian reptiles. About 66 million years ago, a meteor ended the Cretaceous period, wiped out the dinosaurs and most avian reptiles, except for a few ground-dwelling species. One of the surviving species gave rise to the modern tinamou and ostrich group. Another surviving species gave rise to modern ducks, geese, and chickens. And a third surviving species gave rise to all other modern birds. The general consensus of ornithologists is that there are about 10,000 species of birds on the planet today. The diversity of these species is incredible and is the product of millions of years of evolution. There is a species that fills every niche on Earth, from tiny hummingbirds to songbirds, shorebirds, wading birds, sea ducks, woodpeckers, grassland birds, raptors, owls, nightjars, and so many others with whom we share our world. However, non-native species have been very successful adapting to the changes in the landscape created by humans. In cities in the United States, several species of birds are experts at living and surviving among minimal natural resources available in urban areas. Pigeons, house sparrows, and European starlings, all non-native species of birds, have a remarkable ability to adapt to our American urban life, not unlike their invasive plant counterparts. These species readily use our man-made buildings and bridges for nesting. They deftly navigate traffic to find crumbs of food, and because of their gregarious social structures and ability to outcompete other species, they are very successful in our cities. And just like invasive plants, predictably, these invasive birds have expanded their range beyond cities. They have invaded the suburbs, as well as our agricultural areas. And pictured here are European starlings. They form large flocks, sometimes numbering in the hundreds or even thousands, and outcompete native species for food, nesting places, and other dwindling resources. In many suburban areas, we've cleared the land of all native vegetation, built large homes that fill most of the lot, planted non-native shrubs and trees, and installed thirsty turf grass. Very few native species of birds or other wildlife can adapt and survive in this food desert. However, it's suitable for invasive house sparrows, who only survive in the immediate proximity of people. Luckily, homeowners are beginning to wake up to the damaging effects of our sterile yards, thanks to the extraordinary efforts of folks conducting the scientific research and leading the conversations, such as Dr. Doug Tallamy, who wrote Backyards for Nature. If this is not part of your resource collection, I highly recommend this colorful, easy to read homeowner's guide to building backyard landscape. Dr. Tallamy also co-authored The Living Landscape with Rick Dark. And other favorite landscaping resources include Planting in a Post-Wild World and Integrated Landscaping Following Nature's Lead. The homeowners who live in this corner lot have made a concerted effort to diversify their landscape with a variety of native plants, which support a variety of native birds. They included trees, shrubs, flowering perennials, and native grasses in their small landscape. So there's a growing movement of people who wish to reconnect with nature. We're all realizing the need and the value of creating healthier landscapes for both humans and wildlife. The more habitat we create in our yards, the more birds we can attract and support, including our beloved backyard birds such as blue jays, Carolina wren, tufted titmouse, and ruby-throated hummingbird, as well as migrant species who rely on the resources in our yards to successfully complete their twice annual long-distance journey and raise their families so that they maintain and build their populations. Above, a red-eyed vireo sips water at a bird bath offered by a homeowner. And this yellow warbler gleans caterpillars from native plants to feed his nestlings. A wood thrush sings from a sturdy perch, announcing his arrival and calling for his mate. And this rose-breasted grosbeak is poised to take a turn at a nearby feeder. These birds benefit from backyards that provide food, water, shelter, and safe places to raise a family. Of the approximately 10,000 species of birds in the world, 1,120 species have been documented in what's called the ABA, or American Birding Association area, which includes all 50 states, Canada, 2 French islands off the coast of northeastern Canada, and all adjacent waters to a distance of 200 miles from land, or half the distance to a neighboring country, whichever is less. My home state of New Jersey has a wonderful diversity of birds. I feel very lucky. The New Jersey Birds Records Committee has documented 480 different species of birds known to have set foot within New Jersey's borders. And if I may brag about my home state, New Jersey is the 4th smallest state in the Union, yet we host about 43% of all bird species in the United States and Canada. Such a diversity of birds. And how is that possible? Well, New Jersey is situated in a geographic sweet spot. The northern portion of New Jersey is the southernmost limit of many plants of the Northeast, and the southern portion of New Jersey is the northernmost limit of many plants of the Southeast. So northern New Jersey has 3 distinct physiographic regions, each determined by distinctly different geologic features, and each supporting slightly different plant communities. And then all of South Jersey is part of the coastal plain, which can be further divided into the intercoastal plain, a thin corridor along the Delaware River, and the outer coastal plain, which spans the Pine Barrens, which is its own unique ecosystem, and reaching the Bay and Atlantic Ocean. So the diversity of plant communities supports diversity in habitat, which supports diversity of wildlife, including birds. And this biodiversity ensures stability, resistance, and resilience in the landscape. So this is my sister's bird-friendly yard. She and I share a passion for birding and gardening. And when Debbie was planning her bird-friendly yard, she considered the concept of an ecosystem. An ecosystem is a biological community of interacting organisms and their physical environment. So depending on where you live, near the coast, in the mountains, in a development that was once a grassland, or in a community built on land that was once a forest, keep in mind the features of these natural ecosystems to gain inspiration and to help guide your bird-friendly landscape plan for your yard, but at a smaller scale. So within this ecosystem, where a bird finds everything it needs to survive, including food, water, shelter, and a place to raise its family, that's its habitat. In our backyard, the habitat is a blend of native plants, as well as man-made features such as feeders, a bird bath, and other carefully selected nature-inspired structures. Because the Northeast is part of the larger eastern deciduous forest region, trees and shrubs in particular create a complex habitat for birds. So in this presentation, I'm first going to focus on trees and shrubs as staples for a bird-friendly yard. A tree with a spreading canopy, such as this maple, will provide the overstory. A smaller tree or tall shrubs, such as a redbud or Father Gila or red chokeberry, provide the base structure of the understory. And below are smaller shrubs, flowers, ferns, and grasses. And different bird species utilize different levels of the vertical landscape to find food, places to nest, roost, and seek shelter. So let's take a closer look to see how this ensemble of plants will attract and benefit a diversity of birds. This migrating golden-crowned kinglet forages in this native red maple, looking for caterpillars and other insects that overwintered on this tree. Kinglets are small birds, larger than a hummingbird, but smaller than a chickadee. They forage at mid-level to the top of the canopy. They have high energy and rarely sit still. They use their small tweezer-like bill to pluck tiny insects from the branches. Luckily for the kinglet, 285 species of caterpillars use maple as a host plant, according to entomologist Dr. Doug Tallamy. Red maple is one of the earliest flowering trees. The early spring blooming red flowers of red maple are a beacon for birds and make the tree easy for humans to identify. Emerging new growth on red maple, including fruit, twigs, and leaf stalks, are all red. Box elder, another member of the maple family, also hosts caterpillars and is just as attractive to the birds. It satisfies the needs of this female pine warbler migrating through. There are 37 species of warblers recorded in the East. Warblers are small, predominantly insect-eating birds, and many have brilliant colors and patterns. They spend most of the time in the south of the United States, where they overwinter, but they head north to breed. And most pass through New Jersey, seeking more northerly habitats to breed. So spring migration, which is at its peak in late April and May, is the best time to catch a glimpse of these beautiful warblers. Oaks are another great choice for your backyard canopy. Oaks support 534 species of caterpillars. This northern Perula, another species of warbler, relies on the tiny caterpillars and other insects to provide them with the fuel they need to sustain their energy for their long trip from Mexico, Central America, and the Caribbean. Because warblers are insect eaters, most won't be stopping at your feeders for food. They require native plants in the landscape which host the caterpillars. Some caterpillars are overlooked by the birds, like this Polyphemus moth caterpillar. It uses oak as one of its host plants, and here it is pupating inside its blanket of oak leaves. It started out this tiny. Birds have keen eyesight, much better than humans. They can see a wider range of wavelengths, including ultraviolet. They track motion better and see as much as 360 degrees at once in peripheral vision with multiple focal points. This beautiful Polyphemus moth was lucky. It emerges from the leaves, although it too may become food for birds. Leaving the leaves is a concept you've most likely heard before, but leaving the leaves is not always ideal or possible. But breaking your leaves into a shallow pile in a corner of your yard will not only offer habitat for moth and butterfly larvae, but will also benefit the birds. Wrapped inside these wild black cherry leaves is the caterpillar of a Cecropia moth. And here it is as an adult. Many insects spend the winter clinging to a branch, insulated by leaves or other natural structures. A praying mantis may deposit her egg case on the twigs of your shrubs, which in turn will be food for birds. This tufted titmouse is excavating this high protein, energy-rich winter food source. Tufted titmouse is a common backyard bird. They visit feeders for seeds, nuts, and suet. Once they find a suitable seed from your feeder, they fly to a nearby branch to eat Holding the seed within their toes, they hammer the seed with their strong, relatively thick bill to crack it open and consume the meat inside. The tufted titmouse is a cavity nester. It requires ready-made holes in trees, but may also use a human-made nest box. Oaks are a dominant tree species in our eastern deciduous forest region and an excellent choice for your backyard canopy. There are over 50 oak species in eastern North America to choose from. All oaks produce acorns, and acorns are food for wild turkeys and other wildlife, including squirrels and mice, and this benefits the birds. This immature red-shouldered hawk enjoys a meal in the safety of the canopy. Raptors, also known as birds of prey, are a keystone species, without which an ecosystem would fail. Trees are a key component of a bird-friendly ecosystem in the East. This oak tree in my sister Debbie's backyard sprang up from an acorn, a gift from the squirrels, no doubt. She nurtured it and now enjoys this beautiful 20 to 30 foot oak tree. In its shade, she planted woodland sunflowers, which you can see growing in the foreground. The woodland sunflowers can grow to about 6 feet tall. Consider planting flowers, ferns, and native ground covers beneath your trees. Birds benefit from the hiding places they offer, as well as the food. I have a large patch of woodland sunflowers growing outside my kitchen window, where I enjoy watching American goldfinches devour the soft seeds in the summertime. The sunflowers bloom in both sun and shade. Birch trees are prized for their beautiful bark and their delicate foliage. However, if you don't select the right species of birch for the conditions in your yard, your tree may not live to its ripe age of about 30 to 50 years, as it would in a natural setting. A safe bet is the highly cultivated, fast-growing river birch. It is the most adaptable of the native birches and can tolerate dry soil, heavy clay, heat, drought, deer, and pollution. And this distinctive orange peeling bark of the river birch makes this an attractive tree for a backyard. But if you decide on a gray birch, a leaning or toppled trunk in your yard is a prized resource for some birds. It acts as a daytime roost for a common nighthawk, cousin to the chuck-will's widow. The gray camouflage colors of the bark conceal her presence from predators. Considered small trees, gray birch can reach heights between 20 to 40 feet, with a spread between 10 and 20 feet. And they maintain a slender trunk and a narrow crown. One of my favorites is the sun-loving sweetgum. This one volunteered in my backyard, most likely a gift from the birds who disperse the seeds. Sweetgum is a typical plant of swamps and floodplains where the soil is rich. However, it does tolerate a wide range of soil conditions and is very healthy and happy in my dry, sandy soil. It grows a rounded crown as it ages. Leaves are star-shaped with 5 to 7 pointed, fine-toothed lobes, and they turn amazing yellow and purple and red and orange colors in the fall. Sweetgum trees have separate male and female flowers, but both are found on the same tree. So all trees will have fruit. On the top are the male flowers containing the stamen and the pollen, and hanging down are the female flowers containing the sticky stigma, ready to receive the wind-blown pollen. The female flowers are termed capitulate, which means there are many very small flowers all attached at the same point on the flowering stem. The wind blows the pollen from the male flowers on the top to the female flowers on the bottom, after which the male flowers wilt and fall to the ground and the female flowers mature. and the ovary swells into a pointy gumball fruit, protecting both the seeds inside, both the fertilized and the unfertilized seeds, which both contain nutrients for the birds that eat them. And right in the center of this photo is a female red-winged blackbird foraging in a sweetgum tree. To the bottom right is a photo of the more recognizable male showing off his red shoulder patch called an epaulet. Many birds feast on sweetgum seeds, including chickadee, dark-eyed junco, Carolina wren, chipping sparrow, northern cardinal, purple finch, common redpoll, eastern towhee, pine siskin, white-throated sparrow, white-crowned sparrow, wild turkey, mourning dove, quail, wood ducks, mallards, and so many more. But I've heard many folks proclaim that they will never plant a sweetgum tree in their yard because it's too difficult to mow under the canopy and the gumballs ruin the lawnmower. So to that, I suggest don't mow under the sweetgum tree. It has a shallow root system and does not tolerate compacted soil anyway, caused by constant mowing. Instead, plant attractive native grasses at the sunny base of your sweetgum. Seeds of native grasses provide food for birds. Their leaves provide cover and nesting material. And native grasses are an important host plant for native butterflies and moths. And they need minimal to zero care. So try planting switchgrass in sunny areas of your yard and enjoy watching the goldfinches feast in the fall. And if you need more convincing to consider a sweetgum for your yard, it is a host plant for more than 30 species of butterfly and moth caterpillars, including this gorgeous Luna moth. To the right of my sweetgum tree, I have placed an eastern screech owl nest box. Eastern screech owls are more common than you might think and can be found wherever there are trees. So as you can see, they will readily take to a nest box and even in very small yards. The box should be on a post at least 10 feet high with a predator guard. Install your box by the end of the summer so the owls will use it to roost in the winter. My owl usually arrives in November. If you're lucky, they will start a family in late winter. We've had screech owls roost in our box for several years. Some years we've had a gray morph and some years a red morph, pictured here. And one year we had two owls, and we only knew we had two because one of them was gray and one of them was red, but no babies yet. Behind the owl box is a beautiful evergreen spruce. I highly recommend an evergreen tree in every bird-friendly yard. And there are many beautiful native evergreens to choose from. One of my favorites is Eastern Red Cedar. I have several planted in my yard. They are considered a small to medium tree, reaching heights of 20 to 50 feet. The lower branches can be pruned, creating a shady space below for a bench or a bird bath. And at the base of my bird bath, I planted versatile Eastern Columbine, which tolerates both sun and shade. It has lush foliage that remains green throughout the summer season. And bell-shaped red and yellow flowers bloom in April and May and are attractive to hummingbirds. Ruby-throated hummingbirds are the only hummingbird species that migrates east of the Appalachian Mountains. The bird is an iridescent green on the head, back, and wings, with white underneath, and males have a red gorget. This is a photo of a young male who is just starting to grow his ruby throat. The color does not involve pigment. Instead, the structure of the feather surface amplifies one color of light. Attract ruby-throated hummingbirds to your yard by hanging a feeder, 1 part sugar to 3 parts clean water. Hummingbirds build their nests directly on top of a slender branch usually on deciduous trees, including oak, birch, poplar, and hornbeam, and sometimes in pine or holly. She uses thistle, dandelion down, or other soft plant material held together with spider silk or pine resin. She camouflages the nest with lichen and moss. By planting a variety of these plants in your yard, even embracing your dandelions, you can help support hummingbirds. Water is an important component of a bird-friendly yard. The bird bath under my cedar tree is visited by many species who fly in for a sip of water or to take a bath. When finished, this gray catbird can fly up to the safety of the eastern red cedar branches and make sure the coast is clear before flying off. Eastern red cedars tolerate nutrient-poor soil and a wide range in pH, as well as salty conditions, air pollution, and deer. The reddish-brown bark exfoliates in thin, shreddy strips on mature trees and is used by cardinals and fish crows as nesting material. Fish crows also eat the berries. Eastern red cedar is not a true cedar, it's a juniper. The berries are commonly called juniper berries, although they are actually unusually shaped cones. This tree is dioecious, meaning that it has separate male and female plants. You'll need one of each in the yard or in the neighborhood for the female to produce the cones. Male trees produce brown structures called strobili that offer pollen, and female trees have round blue strobili with soft scales that coalesce into this round berry-like cone, and it ripens in the fall. Over 80 species of birds eat these berry-like cones, and the birds in turn provide the important service of seed dispersal, insurance for woodlands. If you do in fact have an eastern red cedar in the neighborhood, it's likely you'll find one volunteering in your yard, a gift from the birds. Eastern red cedar is an early successional tree and one of the first trees to occupy disturbed soils. And although it will tolerate some shade as a sapling, it needs sunlight as it matures. The berries are an excellent food source for yellow-rumped warblers as they migrate south in the fall. This tree's native range extends the entire eastern half of the United States, offering a widely available food source along the flyway. Juniper berries are abundant and persist throughout the colder months. The American robin depends on this tree's berries in the winter when other food sources are scarce. And if you live along the coast, you may see large birds utilize stands of eastern red cedar as a nesting place. This endangered yellow-crowned night heron family is nesting in an eastern red cedar rookery. Due to its high salt tolerance, this tree can grow atop a mound of soil or dredge spoils in a salt marsh, providing many species of large wading birds this valuable resource. The night herons share the rookery with this family of great egrets. And these juvenile glossy ibis learn to fly within the safety of the canopy. Among the branches of the cedar is an entanglement of Virginia creeper vines. Virginia creeper is a beauty. Small greenish white flowers bloom May through August, which lead to one of the most attractive fruits, in my opinion. Clusters of berries turn from pink to blue to dark purple, showcased on the tip of a bright red stem. The berries are valued as food by many birds. The star-shaped leaves turn deep red crimson in the fall. Virginia creeper vines climb up my eastern red cedar trees each season. They don't strangle the tree, nor are they parasitic. They double the food and the flavor for birds. They are easy to pull down from the tree or snip with clippers if I change my mind. Tucked safely within the evergreen boughs of eastern red cedar, this northern saw-whet owl enjoys a meal. Dense branches create a thick and protective canopy for shelter, roosting, and eating. But first, she's got to make room. Birder and photographer Carmela Moneta captured the owl expelling a pellet before eating her next meal. Extraordinary. Pine trees are another evergreen choice for a bird-friendly backyard. All pines produce cones. The familiar pine cone is rounded or egg-shaped with woody scales arranged in a spiral pattern. Scales protect the seeds, which are coveted by many birds. This red-breasted nuthatch has a tiny, slightly upcurved bill. She uses it like a lever or crowbar to extract the seeds from the cone. And she is very comfortable foraging upside down and able to angle her approach in ways that other birds can't, filling another niche in nature. Success. Pine warblers are also attracted to pine trees. In addition to eating the pine seeds, they forage among the branches, looking for caterpillars and other bugs. Pine warblers nearly always build their nests in pine trees, located in pine forests or in mixed pine deciduous forests, usually high in the canopy, concealed among the cones and needles. The nest is built using grasses, plant stems, bark strips, fine rootlets, and pine needles. The cup of the nest is lined with spider silk, feathers, fur, and the down of soft plant materials. Across much of the range, native pine forests have been destroyed or altered by logging, development, or fire suppression. Over the past few decades, pines have been introduced into deciduous forests in the east, and the pine warblers have taken up residence. There are many native pines for you to choose from for your bird-friendly backyard. As the name suggests, pine siskins have a fondness for the seeds of pines and other conifers like cedars, larch, hemlock, and spruce. They also feed on seeds from deciduous trees such as alder, birch, sweetgum, and maples. They eat the young buds of willows, elms, and maples, and they'll glean the seeds of grasses, dandelions, chickweed, sunflowers, and goldenrod. They forage for insects, spiders, and grubs from leaves and branch tips, and occasionally take insects from the air. Before seaside goldenrod goes to seed, the flowers offer an important nectar source for migrating monarchs. Migrating ruby-crowned kinglets also benefit by gleaning tiny insects from the goldenrod as they also migrate down the coastal flyway south for the winter. The seeds of seaside goldenrod are tiny and soft, perfect for pine siskins. Pine siskins feed readily at backyard feeders, preferring smaller seeds without tough shells, such as thistle. Pine siskins have been reported drinking from sap wells drilled by sapsuckers. This yellow-bellied sapsucker was busy drilling its wells when I snapped this photo. They drill two different kinds of wells into different layers of the tree tissue. Deep wells are drilled into the xylem in early spring when water and nutrients are flowing upward into the branches. Once the tree leaves out, the sapsucker drills shallow wells into the tree's phloem, the spongy inner layer which carries the sap downward from the leaves. The wells are drilled in neatly organized horizontal rows. Bark of many evergreen tree species tend to be thick or blocky, which protects the tree from fire, heat, and disease. Bark is unique to trees and shrubs, as well as woody vines. This outer covering on the trunk, branches, twigs, and even on woody roots is composed of dead corky cells that protect the stem. The phloem tissue eventually grows outward, dies, and becomes part of the outer bark. Bugs hide in the cracks and crevices of bark, but the red-bellied woodpecker has just the right tools to extract them. The strong bill is used for excavation, and the long tongue is used for extraction. The tongue is barbed and has a sticky tip. Tiny muscles in the tongue allow the woodpecker to maneuver it in any direction in order to trap prey and pry insects and larvae out of their hiding places. Their neck is long, strong, and flexible. The woodpecker's foot has 2 toes facing forward and 2 toes facing backward, allowing for a strong grip. And you can see how it uses its stiff tail as a prop, positioned for strength and balance. Pine trees can grow very tall and are often selected by raptors as nest locations, perching platforms, or as dining tables. Incorporate a pine tree in your backyard ecosystem and invite a peregrine falcon for dinner. This majestic bird is dining on duck foie gras. And this hollowed out pine tree is coveted real estate for cavity nesting birds, such as this Carolina chickadee. She is cleaning out the wood debris inside as she prepares the nursery. She'll line her nest with soft materials she finds on the forest floor, left behind by other mammals with whom she shares the woodland or backyard habitat, such as this eastern cottontail. You can offer her some soft nesting material. Chickadees, tufted titmouse, and other birds will come and pull out what they need. You can also install a nest box in your yard for chickadees. This chickadee made her nest using moss, soft grasses, and fur. This yellow warbler also uses fur, hair, and other soft plant materials to line her nest. This northern white pine was planted in Deb's backyard about 15 to 20 years ago. Mixed with other native trees, including oak, maple, redbud, and a non-native star magnolia, it now provides a wonderful privacy border along the back fence, as well as habitat for birds, providing food, shelter, and protection. It's inevitable that trees may lose some branches. Spring cleanup includes picking up branches and sticks that have fallen to the ground in the winter, and this is a gold mine for birds. Pile up the branches into a brush pile. Birds will use it to escape predators, such as this Cooper's hawk. I have several brush piles in my yard, some in the corners of my yard where Carolina wrens forage for bugs, but I also have one in the middle of my yard to offer some shelter and protection so the small birds can fly safely from one side of the yard to the other. Like pine trees, the American holly is an easily recognizable tree with broad evergreen leaves. This black-throated green warbler forages for insects during spring migration. Blue-gray gnatcatchers breed in the Northeast. This gnatcatcher gleans caterpillars and other insects to feed its young. Fruit ripens by the end of fall and persists throughout the winter, offering a crucial food source for birds such as American robins. Contrary to popular belief, American robins don't migrate south for the winter. Populations may shift slightly south, but they are year-round residents in the United States. They may utilize the trees and shrubs in your yard for nesting, but once they are done, They congregate in large flocks in search of holly trees, eastern red cedar, or other berry-producing trees and shrubs. Within our neighborhoods, small pockets of woodlands are typically the only places left where they can find these important resources, unless we plant them in our backyards. Robins are often joined by regal cedar waxwings, who are highly social and also travel in large flocks searching for berries in winter. Interestingly, most holly species in North America are shrubs. Invite birds to your yard with these two fantastic native shrubs, Winterberry holly and Inkberry holly. Both shrubs have a height and spread of about 6 to 10 feet. They prefer acidic soils and moist to wet conditions, although they can both tolerate drier conditions once they're established. They grow in full sun to part shade and make excellent understory shrubs. Small white flowers bloom in June and July on both shrubs and are attractive to bees and butterflies. Winterberry holly develops bright red berries that cling to the stem throughout the winter, even after the leaves drop on this deciduous shrub. Black berries develop on Inkberry holly and persist throughout the winter, tucked between the evergreen leaves. While I was birding this past fall, I observed a Swainson's thrush foraging on Inkberry holly. And one of the most satisfying things to me is to watch birds eat seeds and berries in the wild. Then when I plant these important resources in my yard, I know that I am providing sustenance for the birds and making a positive impact on the larger landscape. Here's the Winterberry holly growing in my sister Debbie's backyard landscape as part of her understory. And look under the shrubs, there is a purposeful open space, a protective shelter for secretive sparrows, such as this eastern towhee, who likes to scratch the ground and turn over leaves looking for food. Sparrows occupy the lower levels of the ecosystem, utilizing medium to small shrubs, ferns, grasses, flowering herbs, and ground covers for food, nesting places, and shelter. Around Debbie's flower beds, she placed logs to create a natural-looking border. Similar to the brush pile concept, the organisms decomposing the logs slowly break down the wood and add organic matter to the soil, while also providing a food source for birds, such as the northern flicker, a woodpecker who forages for worms, grubs, and other soft invertebrates in logs, brush piles, and other natural debris on the ground. Other bird-friendly berry-producing shrubs include northern bayberry and winged sumac. They are excellent companion plants to the sweetgum tree. They all require similar conditions, full sun, and dry, well-drained soil. They also tolerate some salinity, making them appropriate for coastal areas, but also appropriate to plant near roads that are salted with de-icing salts in the wintertime. Northern bayberry is an upright, multi-trunked, semi-evergreen shrub with narrow evergreen leaves. And the waxy berries of northern bayberry grow in tight clusters along the length of the stems. They ripen up in October and remain on the plant well into winter. And this flock of migrating tree swallows descends on this grouping of shrubs and they devour the fruit. And this important food source provides much needed energy as the birds prepare for their journey south. And because of its late winter leaf and fruit retention, northern bayberry provides good protective cover and food for many species of birds, including bobwhite quail, ruffed grouse, eastern meadowlark, gray catbird, red-bellied woodpeckers, and so many more. Winged sumac offers another important food source for birds. Berries ripen to a bright red in fall and linger through the winter when food is otherwise scarce. Like northern bayberry and eastern red cedar, sumac is an early pioneer species that grows fairly quickly and spreads vegetatively by sprouting from its root crown. It can rapidly colonize an area. This is my crazy backyard, and it's best suited for larger yards. Summer sweet or sweet pepperbush prefers partial shade, slightly moist soil, and makes an excellent understory shrub. It's multi-branched, deciduous. It has dark green aromatic leaves and grows 5 to 8 feet tall and 4 to 6 feet wide. The summer blooming, sweet smelling clusters of white flowers are extremely attractive to pollinators, and these tiny soldier beetles congregate all over the flowers. And it's also visited by native bees and butterflies, including this beautiful spice bush swallowtail, as well as hummingbirds. And the flowers are followed by a dried fruit capsule that holds the seeds. And the seeds are enjoyed by birds like this American goldfinch. It's slow to establish, but relatively easy to grow, but avoid hot, dry areas. This is a versatile, attractive, and wildlife-friendly shrub. Spicebush is at the top of my list of beautiful native backyard shrubs. It prefers part shade, but also grows in full sun and also tolerates heavy shade. It grows between 6 to 12 feet tall with a 6 to 12 foot spread. In the wild, it's found growing in moist places such as ravines and valleys or along streams. But in a backyard setting, the shade helps to prevent the soil from drying out. This is one of 2 plants that I have growing in my backyard, my dry backyard. It is also dioecious with separate male and female plants, and both are required for the female to bear the fruit. So far, mine has not. I think I have 2 males. The red drupes ripen in the fall and are a food source for birds. And it's one of our earliest blooming flowering shrubs with beautiful small yellow flowers opening in March, providing nectar to early emerging insects. And it's host to spice bush swallowtail caterpillars who start life looking like a bird dropping. And it grows into a large, beautiful caterpillar. And as you saw on the previous slide, it morphs into a large, beautiful butterfly that was nectaring on a summer sweet. And here is the spice bush growing in my sister's backyard. It overhangs a small water pond she placed at the edge of the lawn. By digging a hole the size of the tub, she dropped it into the ground. Frogs, toads, dragonflies, and birds all benefit from this easy to maintain water feature. And to deter mosquitoes from depositing eggs, you can add a mosquito dunk, a sun spinner, or drain and refill the water every few days. Deb planted a red chokeberry in her backyard. And keeping in mind your yard as a conservation opportunity, adding trees, shrubs, even a single tree or single shrub to your yard is an excellent way to attract and support birds. And the flowers of the red chokeberry are just gorgeous. They bloom in spring, white petals with bright pink anthers. The flowers are followed by red berries that persist in winter and offer food for birds. And this is my bird-friendly front yard. And as we discussed, trees are part of the larger forest ecosystem and an important component of a bird-friendly yard. I hope I've convinced you of that. And I have a dead tree standing front and center in my front yard. But when a tree in the forest dies, it continues to play a role within the habitat. And in my yard, my dead tree also continues to play a key role as a component of my bird-friendly front yard habitat. Several years ago, a red-bellied woodpecker created a cavity in this tree, and for 2 consecutive years raised a family there. And my husband and I would peer out our second-story window and watch the parents tirelessly bring insects and grubs and other protein-rich invertebrates back to the nest to feed their hungry babies. And I mentioned earlier, tree cavities are scarce to come by, yet so many of our backyard birds are cavity nesters. So maintaining this dead tree provided these woodpeckers with a much needed natural resource and brought us much joy. And after the babies fledged, we were delighted when the parents introduced their youngsters to the feeders. This young male was learning how to extract peanuts. So when a tree in the forest dies, sunlight reaches the forest floor, encouraging the growth of vines and sun-loving plants. So I wrapped chicken wire around the trunk of my dead tree and planted coral honeysuckle. And you can see it growing up the trunk. Coral honeysuckle, also called trumpet honeysuckle, has beautiful reddish-orange trumpet-shaped flowers that bloom May through June. And as you can imagine, it's a magnet for ruby-throated hummingbirds. And the berries are also an attractive food source for many species of birds. So if you don't have a dead tree in your yard to offer your birds food or for nesting, you can install nest boxes. And nestwatch.org is a wonderful resource. Here's the website, created by the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, which offers lots of tips on how to build and install nest boxes. So pictured here is an eastern bluebird parent feeding insects to its baby. And the baby is just about ready to fledge. And I have the wonderful opportunity to monitor 10 nest boxes each summer at my local county park. Eastern bluebirds use grasses and pine needles to build their nest. And the clutch size is between 2 to 7 pale blue eggs, but usually 5. And the incubation period is from 11 to 19 days. And when the eggs hatch, the babies are naked and they may have a sparse tuft of feather down. Their eyes are closed and they can barely hold themselves up. And they are 100% completely dependent on their parents to meet all of their needs. And their parents are increasingly dependent on us humans to help them. So here's that same brood 3 days later. Baby birds have the instinct to open wide, and they have a brightly colored throat, easy for the parents to target with food, 100% bugs. They will remain in the nest for 17 to 21 short days until they're ready to fledge. So a diet of insect and bug protein helps them to grow quickly. And once the babies fledge the nest, they are still reliant on their parents for food. They're reliant on their parents to learn all of their survival skills in only a few short weeks. And here, Dad is feeding his youngster mealworms gathered from a feeder. You can support these growing fledglings and their parents by offering a variety of food at your feeders. Fruit, nectar, mealworms, peanuts, and seeds all mimic the kinds of food growing in the natural habitat. So as I come to the end of my program, I hope you've been inspired to take steps to make your backyard more bird-friendly. With some careful thought and planning, you can turn your yard into habitat. So spend some time outside to watch how all facets of nature are utilized by birds and incorporate these natural features into your yard. I'll quote Wayne Dyer by saying, "If you change the way you look at things, things you look at change." A dead tree becomes a nesting place instead of an eyesore. Dandelions become nesting material. A pile of leaves become a supermarket. Keep in mind native plants that produce fruit, seeds, and nuts, and also host caterpillars and other insects. Fill all vertical spaces with native plants, including shrubs, vines, grasses, and ground covers, and plant a tree or two, and enjoy your very own bird and wildlife sanctuary. Many thanks to these wonderful photographers who so kindly allowed me to use their fantastic photos. And here is my contact information. Please don't hesitate to reach out with any questions, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have now.
Oh, that was wonderful, Becky. Thank you so much. We have several questions. The first is, can you give us more information about what the backyard book was that you mentioned?
Yes, I have it right here with me. It's called Bringing Nature Home: How You Can Sustain Wildlife with Native Plants by Dr. Douglas Tallamy. And a couple others, The Living Landscape is one he co-authored with Rick Dark, and Integrated Landscaping, Following Nature's Lead is another book that I referenced. And there's so many wonderful books out there now that cover how to landscape your backyard in a very sustainable, bird-friendly, and wildlife-friendly way.
Great, thank you. Can you offer any cautions on using bird feeders in a natural landscape?
There are lots of things that you shouldn't do. Things that come to my mind anyway. Folks like to deter squirrels from coming to their feeders, so they might grease the pole. Bad idea. Birds, their feathers may get oil or grease on them, and that will be very detrimental. Try to use all natural as possible: seeds, peanuts, fruit. Try not to use, if you're creating hummingbird nectar, for example, avoid red dye. Those are a couple of examples I can offer.
Very good. Can you speak about the relationship of birds and dogs? And how much does the presence of a dog discourage birds in your area?
I think it's really species specific. There are some birds that are very adapted to humans and all of human life, including dogs. But dogs are natural predators, and especially birds are especially vulnerable when they are fledglings. Once they fledge the nest, they don't automatically know how to fly, so they may spend a day or 2 or 3 on the ground being fed by a parent. And if there are dogs around, that could be very detrimental for the bird. And if I could also share information about cats. I love cats. However, they are the #1 cause of bird fatality in the United States. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service estimates between 1 billion, that's a billion with a B, and 4 billion birds killed each year unnecessarily by cats. So please consider, if you have a cat, to keep your cat inside. Sometimes you might think, my cat doesn't kill birds, they don't ever bring me any birds or anything, but you don't know really what your cat is doing out there. So just offering some caution.
Very good point. Would you recommend a closed woodland or an open woodland or a meadow with a thicket if we are developing a 1-acre suburban setting?
So I might, if that were me, I might take some time to research where do I live, in the context of the overall ecological plant community. Do I live in an area that used to be a meadow? Do I live in an area that used to be a forest? The soil is probably will support that type of plant community best. And once you figure that out, then you can start selecting plants that are appropriate for your particular yard. And if you do live in a place that, let's say, was a complete forest, it's okay to have part of it become a meadow. Certainly, ecologically speaking, there's succession, primary succession, secondary succession. So nature's always changing. Small meadows may appear and it may be reforested over time. So the ecological nativity of your land, and then of course your personal preference, and maybe do a little research on what birds are endangered or threatened in your area and try to provide habitat for them.
Excellent. Are praying mantises native or non-native insects? And do they eat beneficial insects as well as pests?
That is a question for an entomologist. I can give you my answer is I think there's a couple of different kinds. There's the invasive Chinese praying mantis, and there's also, I believe it's called the Carolina mantis. Of course, the native Carolina mantis is welcome in the yard. The invasive Chinese mantis grows much, much bigger, and that is the one that will also take down hummingbirds. So that one is a no-no in my yard, but it's not always easy to tell them apart, especially if it hasn't reached its full 6-inch size. But you can tell with careful observation. You can tell the nest, the egg case apart. They're slightly different. I can't tell you right now which one is which, but they do look different, and it's something to research.
Okay, very good. I've heard that most river birches that you can purchase in the nursery trade are cultivars and not seed grown. Is this a problem?
That is a very good question. It may be true. I do not know. My river birches actually came from my neighbor. So technically they're grown from seed, but they could be a cultivar. And if you are a native purist, which I completely support if you are, that is something to research. I'm sorry, I can't tell you the exact answer to that question. But surely there are birches out there that are native. You may just have to look a little bit farther and deeper to find some. And it's such a beautiful tree, a great one for the yard.
Okay. Do you clean out the Screech Owl box at the end of each season?
Excellent question. My husband cleaned it out one year, and the following year we did not get a Screech Owl back. After that, he did not. We've had them since, and he has not cleaned out the Screech Owl box. So that's my own personal experience. Other folks have gone back and forth as well with cleaning it out or not cleaning it out. It's certainly a lot of fun because you go through all the different feathers that were food to see what the owl had eaten. I do clean out nest boxes for the songbirds, such as the eastern bluebirds, the chickadees that nest in nest boxes in my yard. It's important to remove any parasites. The Screech Owl box, that one is on its own in my yard.
Okay. I have a black walnut surrounding a large area of my property. It seems that the walnuts are not the best bird habitat. Is this true?
I would wonder then what is meant specifically by habitat. I have about a dozen black walnut trees in my yard. I am shaking my fist every fall because I have to pick up all the walnuts. But they are a host plant for many caterpillars. And of course, that is the connection we want for the birds to feed their babies that protein. And then they grow really big and are large. And I noticed that a lot of raptors that fly around the yard like to land on that huge walnut tree. So it's definitely offering a perch. My red-bellied woodpeckers are always in that tree, excavating bugs. So in that sense, they are very much a great part of the habitat.
Excellent. Do male and female junipers have to be planted in very close proximity or ways apart?
Good question. I don't know, but they seem to sprout up everywhere, and I'm going to take a guess in my yard, it's because the birds are actually dispersing the seeds. So if you even have one and there's another tree in the neighborhood, or even if you have none and there's a tree in the neighborhood, if you wait long enough, it's likely, and you don't mow, it's likely you will have eastern red cedars pop up in your yard because the birds are certainly going to disperse them. And I have a split rail fence, and in a very straight line right under that fence are a whole bunch of eastern red cedars that were obviously planted as the birds perched there and dispersed the seeds and are now growing nicely. But I avoided answering your actual question as how far apart they need to be. I don't know. I'm sorry.
Okay. You mentioned that hummingbirds will line their nests with dandelion fluff. Are you aware of any non-native plants that serve as important food sources for native birds?
Am I aware of any non-native plants that serve as food sources for birds? I am aware of many, many invasive species that birds readily use for berries, such as autumn olive. And I won't go into any more because I don't want to, I would not want you to purchase any invasive species to feed the birds because they quickly take over habitat. We might not see it. The birds fly away, disperse the seed into the woodland, and the woodland is then covered by Japanese barberry. So my recommendation is to always go native.
Very good. This is a comment, not a question. Please be sure to discourage the use of synthetic yarns for putting out for nesting materials.
Thank you. Good point. Synthetic yarns or any synthetics, fishing line, even, they're tough to break down. Threads, string will be dangerous to birds. They'll bring it to their nest, and then baby birds or any other birds, osprey babies will get, it will become wrapped around their head, and it doesn't end well. So good point. Use as much natural material as you can. When I put fur out for the birds, there is an alpaca farm not too far away from where I live, and that is the fur that I use to put out for my birds.
Nice. Is there a plant list that you'll be able to provide to us, or is there one on your website that you can refer us to?
Well, thank you for asking that question, and I will now shamelessly promote Ocean County Soil Conservation District's initiative. It's called Jersey Friendly Yards, and it's jerseyyards.org, and we launched this initiative in cooperation with the Barnegat Bay Partnership. It's actually their website, and on the website we have a plant database with over 400 species. And you can use what's called a search filter where you check off all the conditions in your yard. So acidic soil, well-drained soil, maybe you have a shady area, maybe you want to plant specifically shrubs. There's even some special ecoregions. We have the pinelands and the coast. And then the 400 species will narrow down based on your selections, and then you can click on each one and read about it. And then we have a list of nurseries. Of course, it's, I'll say Jersey specific, but many of the plants that we consider Jersey friendly are not natives to Jersey, but they are native to the East Coast or the Northeast, let's say, and even a little bit in the West. As long as they are not invasive species, they can be on our list. So that's a great resource, Jersey Friendly Yards at jerseyyards.org.
Okay, very good. Another comment that both sumacs and bayberries are dioecious and require both male and female plants.
That is correct. Yep.
Can the winged sumac be grown in pots if your yard isn't big enough for a colony?
Ooh, that's a good question. I've never tried it. I can't imagine it would be happy. It does like to sucker and expand its range vegetatively. So it might not like it in a pot, but you can try it. It's a plant. It's okay if it doesn't survive.
Very good. I have many male spice bushes. How can I find and purchase a female spice bush?
Oh, I have that same question because my two plants are both males, as I learned when they reached sexual maturity and started to flower. No berries yet. So I would suggest to you and myself to go to a nursery where maybe one has already reached maturity and is flowering, at least if it's not quite getting berries, but I can look at the flower, and if it's a pistillate flower, a female flower, then that would be the one I would want to purchase. A reputable nursery should be able to steer you in the right direction.
Very good. Can you repeat how your sister deters mosquitoes from the water bucket?
Mm-hmm. So you can add a mosquito dunk, it's called. It's, I don't know what it's made of, but it's not dangerous, and you can put it in the water and it simply deters mosquito larvae from growing. To my knowledge, it's not, I guess the word dangerous could apply to other creatures, like a little frog that might want to jump in there, or to birds. The other way is to get a sun spinner, which is something that you might think about in a bird bath that spins around. It runs on solar energy, and then it just kind of keeps the water moving. So that's something else you can put in there. And then the third choice would be to just every 3 days or so to dump out that water and put fresh water in there.
Okay. We're getting rid of a lawn and planting a lot of native trees, shrubs, and herbaceous perennials. We have a few existing western red cedars in our yard. Will they be beneficial to any of the native eastern birds?
I'm not familiar with a western red cedar. I have not heard of that plant, so I don't know. If you're going, it sounds like you're going all out on your landscape. How about start with an all native palette? Might be one option.
Sounds good. I read about the importance of frequency of cleaning hummingbird feeders to kill pathogens. Your thoughts on this?
Yes, I do my best to clean out my feeder at least once a week. In the heat of the summer, I notice that the water will become yucky after a shorter period of time. So I do try to keep my eye on it to clean it out. What helps is if I pre-mix the 3-to-1 nectar mixture, the sugar water, and have it ready in the refrigerator, and that cuts back on my time. I can quickly clean out the hummingbird feeder and fill it up with the refrigerated sugar water.
Good tip. Are there any species of birds that are particularly fond or reliant on beach plums?
Ooh, good question. We have lots of beach plums here on the Jersey Shore, and I have not found in research or observation any birds that eat the beach plum. So no, but they attract bees in early spring and other beneficial insects. So that in itself, thinking about the ecological connection, is definitely a great impetus for planting a beach plum.
Very good. Is there a recommended first step, either canopy, understory, ground cover, etc., or can you start anywhere to make a bird-friendly yard?
I would start with what you've got. Take inventory of what trees and shrubs you have in your yard. Do some research on get a soil test. I'm with the soil district, so that would be the first thing you should do, is get a soil test to determine what kind of soil you have. And then you can do some research on what kinds of plants might grow best in that type of soil. And then kind of slowly put together a collage of plants, thinking about at least one tree, hopefully, in your yard, at least one shrub in your yard, and fill it in with the ferns, if you have shady areas, which eventually you will if you have the tree, the grasses and the ground covers. Whatever's easiest, and I guess whatever's available as well. But do know everything's going to grow, including the trees and shrubs. So you don't want to plant sunny grasses right next to your small sapling, because in a few years you'll have to move them.
Okay. I went to plant aronia, but I understand it's a deer favorite. What strategies do you have for dealing with deer in New Jersey?
Oh, good question. Yes, we have lots of deer in New Jersey. The strategy might be to not plant the favorite plants of deer, and unfortunately select some alternatives. So if the deer are eating your aronia, so far mine is okay, and I do have deer that come through my yard every once in a while. But find some deer tolerant shrubs instead, and or trees. And my favorite tree that comes to mind that I know is deer tolerant is that eastern red cedar.
Okay. Do you have any tips for purchasing seeds, like sunflower seeds, that are clear of Roundup or other chemicals?
Oh, that's a good question. I usually get my seeds from, here's a free plug for Wild Birds Unlimited. There's one locally, and it's high quality seed. Good question though. You're making me think I should go ask them to make sure that their seeds are grown without any chemicals. So I would go to a reputable source, definitely.
Sounds good. My feeders have attracted hordes of house sparrows and starlings. Any suggestions?
Sorry about that. Probably time to put the feeders away for at least a little while if the birds are taking over, because they're not going to leave if you have a continuous food source. And I'm sure it will break your heart because you're not going to be feeding all the other wonderful native birds in your yard, but try it for a little while, maybe a month, and then they may forget or find somewhere else. I don't know if they'll forget, but they might find somewhere else in the neighborhood with a reliable food source, and then you can put them back out in a month, or put them back out when the season changes, because the birds are going to go in all different directions to breed. So the same ones probably won't be in your yard.
Okay. Fothergilla is native further south, but we have some in my Connecticut garden. Would they still be supporting local birds?
Good question. There's lots of discussion in the conservation community about how native is native. Certainly a website called BONAP, the Biota of North America program, I believe it is, BONAP, BONAP.org, is a great website to determine nativity of any North American plant. And if you want to be a native purist, you can follow their maps. But sometimes I do plant plants that are a little bit out of range, and our Jersey Friendly Yards website has plants that are not native to New Jersey as recommendations. I think the ecological community at large, insects, birds, will still be able to benefit from that plant. But I would support you if you decide to be a native purist, and I would take your lead as well. I'll follow your lead.
Okay. We have a tip for the person with all of the starlings to put their bird feeders into cages with only small openings that your small birds can enter, but the starlings cannot. Great tip.
Wonderful. Mm-hmm.
And our last question that we have time for is, would you remove burning bush and privet in a yard where the cardinals love to hide in the privet?
Absolutely. There are many, many other native choices where cardinals are going to hide. So to remove invasive species is #1 priority in a yard, and then replace it with a similar species that you like, that's native, and the cardinals will, they will be fine.
Very good.
As long as they're other native choices.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Becky, for sharing all of this wonderful information and inspiring all of us to look through plant catalogs this winter and look for more plants that will be supporting our local birds and incorporating them into our gardens.
It's been my pleasure, Penny. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm excited that everybody is going to enhance their own yards for the birds.